The Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, Alberta Wheat Commission, and C&M Seeds.
Bernard Tobin here at the Southwest Ag Conference, kicking off this morning with Phil Needham, who's a wheat specialist from Kentucky. And hey, Phil, you just finished your presentation on some incredible wheat yields that you saw around the world in 2016. 245 bushels, a grower you work with in England.
Not a grower I work with, but a grower, yes.
A grower in England. 230 in New Zealand, is that correct?
That's correct.
Tell us about how these yields happen, and then we'll talk about how we make them happen in Ontario.
Sure. So we're at the Southwest Ag Conference in Ontario, and I just got through talking to Peter Johnson, and he said there was a field in Ontario in 2016 averaged and was documented at 168 bushels per acre. Okay, so high yields are certainly possible. Almost everybody that's had 100 bushel wheat or 120 bushel wheat as an average on a field, especially in this province, has seen regions on a yield monitor in the combine 20 or 40 or 50 bushels better than the field average. So what we always try and do is try and figure out why those areas that are making 20 or 40 or 50 bushel more than the field average, why are they making more wheat? Is it soil type? Is it fertility? What is it? Right. And oftentimes you can drill down into those yield maps with soil tests, try and look at a field in a little bit more detail, and in some examples you can try and figure out, is it a pH problem, is it a drainage problem, does it need more phosphate? Any of these, there's lots of things that it could be, and sometimes you can correct the things just by honing into those regions to try and figure out why they were lower yielding or why other areas were higher yielding.
One thing you talked about today was identifying weak links. Again, that potential is there, but what are the weak links? Let's talk about some of those you talk about. You always start with the combine, that even residue. How important is that?
It's really important, and what I try and tell growers, one of the best tools a farmer has, and one of the simplest tools a farmer has to help manage wheat, is a tape measure. Okay, lay that tape measure on the ground after seeding and measure the number of plants per yard of row or per meter of row here. Go over a row, count the plants per meter in this row, do the same, do the same, do the same. Move over there 30 feet or 100 feet or 200 feet, do the same again. High yields need to be uniform. The field needs to be uniform. So what we're looking for is uniform and consistent emergence of the plants. We're looking for uniform spatial distribution of the plants per unit area, per square meter, etc. Residue management that you asked for is a key core, the core of uniformity in many examples. A lot of guys are putting 40-foot or 45-foot heads on combines that only spread residue 30 or 35 feet. So if you've got a 15-foot band or a 10-foot band or a 20-foot band between combine passes that you're zero or no-tilling wheat into, then you've got areas with lots of residue. Right off the bat, you see differentials in emergence because of the residue, and you see differentials in growth as a result of the residue, and that's not what we want for high yields. So what I try and tell guys a lot, and I've always been trying to communicate this with manufacturers, and I think manufacturers have done a better job over the year with development of different residue management systems at the back, but any improvements of residue management systems at the back of the combine seem to be negated by the fact that heads are getting wider. Yeah. So spread residue evenly. Don't put a head on a combine any wider than the combine can spread residue over, okay? And
I was going to say, talk about drilled setup. You talked about it's so important, getting the proper downforce, making sure you're getting that proper depth.
And it depends a little bit where the grower is and what he's no-tilling with from an equipment perspective. But if here in Ontario, most of the seeders are disc drills, and I prefer disc drills just because they're better in zero till at cutting through heavy residue. The depth control is much better with the disc seeder. Now you get out into northern areas of Western Canada when they're planting through low areas and round sloughs and everything else. The disc drills struggle sometimes from a point of view of the row units can block up with mud, and that's a different topic. But any seeder that a grower has, we've got to set them up to get the seeds in the ground consistently, okay? I don't want seeds in the ground an inch here and half an inch there and 2 inches there. I want the same depth everywhere in the field. I tend to target an inch on spring wheat and maybe an inch and a half on winter wheat, but I don't want them all over the place. We're looking for uniform seed depth. We're looking for a seed slot that's closed consistently, especially on winter wheat, because it's critically important for winter survival in cool climates to have the slot closed consistently. If you have any openings in the seed slot where the cold temperatures can get down to that young plant, the crown of that young plant, it's probably not going to make it through the winter in a cool winter.
Let's talk a little bit about variety selection. Obviously, there's a range of varieties. You're a big proponent of growers putting 3 or 4 varieties, running trials on their farm.
I'm a big proponent of trials, period. You don't learn much unless you've got something to compare. So yes, what I try to do on the growers that I work with is plant at least 3 or 4 new varieties new to the area and plant them in strips alongside existing varieties that the farmers use for 2 or 3 years. Because there may well be 2 or 1 or 3 varieties out there that are X percentage better than the ones you're raising now, but unless you compare, you don't know. Provincial data is great, but provincial data is specific to a set of soil types that may be closely correlated to what you're working with, they may be not. For example, some growers here in Ontario use a lot of manure or turkey litter or hog manure or any of the above. And as soon as you start putting a variety into an environment with a lot of manure and a lot of residual nitrogen, the rules start changing. You have to find shorter varieties that don't tiller much, ones that stand very well, because lodging can be a major issue in high yielding systems.
Let's talk fertility. I mean, and one of the great keys here. You're a big proponent in obviously soil testing and long-term soil testing, knowing the fertility of your field.
I've got growers when I started working with them 20 years ago that had 20 or 25 years of fertility data on a field. They could tell me what the soil test P and K and sulfur and other nutrient levels were for 25 years or 20 years prior to me working with them. They could tell me how much P was applied, how much K was applied, how much lime was applied, assuming they were applied for 20 or 25 years. Having that kind of a data set to start with a grower is pretty important. High management wheat is about making decisions. It's about making good decisions. The better the decision you can make, the more you can impact yield. But you need lots of information like soil test values over time to make better, more informed decisions. So high yields are all about making well-informed decisions, and you need the data. You need the soil test data or the tissue test data or the quantitative data, counting the number of plants per yard, making sure it's even across the field. These are all cores of high management wheat.
Let's talk nitrogen. You're a big fan of I'm not sure of how many applications, but you talked about one grower in New Zealand, 6 spring applications of nitrogen. Probably not realistic in Ontario, but what's a good recommendation for?
There's still some growers in Ontario that are putting 1 application on. My recommendation for Ontario would be at least 2 shots. Splitting it definitely helps yield. It definitely helps standability in a high management system when you're pushing the nitrogen rates to the max to try and keep a crop standing up. So if you compare a grower that splits his N on a high nutrition field compared to a grower that's putting it all down in late March, early April, you're going to see better standability out of a split, which translates into higher yields. The other good thing about a split is it gives you a little bit better idea how much nitrogen that crop needs, because every year is different. If it's a cooler spring, not a lot of mineralization of nitrogen, the N rates are probably going to be higher. If it's a warm spring, there's more mineralization, probably the N rates may need to be lowered. So you can tailor a nitrogen rate a little better later in the season when you're making the second application.
Final question for you. You're a big believer in phosphorus in the seed row. You think you shouldn't be planting wheat in Ontario unless you're putting phos in the seed row. Tell us about that.
Peter Johnson makes it very, very, very clear.
And he'll love to hear that.
And I'm 100% with Peter. He's 100% right. Don't raise wheat without phosphorus in the row if you're looking for maximum yields. It's that simple. I showed data this morning, 2 replicated trials. One was 8 bushel, one was more than that. I forget what it was because I'm looking at different products compared to broadcast. But guys in Ontario, when I do a grower meeting in Ontario and there's 100 people in the room and I ask the growers in that room, how many of you are putting phosphorus in the row? There might be 10, there might be 20 if you're lucky. Now maybe there's some guys that don't want to put their hand up and admit they are, but it's a pretty small percentage, okay? I'm absolutely confident telling guys they're going to see a positive return on their investment if they put phos in the row from a yield perspective. We see more uniform emergence. We see better emergence through the fall. We see better plant health, better root system, and oftentimes better survivability, especially if it's a hard winter. Right. So yeah, I'm 100% get phosphorus in the row. Figure out a way of getting phosphorus in the row if you're going to plant wheat.
Awesome. Well, Phil, hey, thank you so much for taking the time, dropping by.
Thank you.
SWAC is always a great conference.
It's a good conference.
Leading it off this morning with your presentation. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Take care.